want to bring in Arlette Saenz to join us. Arlette, what are the facts here and what are Democrats saying to this?
Well, really right now, what we are hearing from both Speaker Mike Johnson and Democratic leadership is them engaging in this messaging war over who is to blame for this current shutdown. What Republicans are arguing is that they believe that any negotiations about extending those expiring Obamacare subsidies, which is really central to Democrats' arguments and demands, that those discussions can't happen until the government is reopened. And as Speaker Johnson pointed out, they believe that this is an issue that can be handled a little bit later down the road. Those subsidies are set to expire on December 31st at the end of the year. So what Republicans like Speaker Johnson are arguing is Democrats need to reopen the government and allow the work to continue to negotiate for actual negotiations to begin about how to extend or possibly reform those enhanced Obamacare subsidies. But Democrats, meanwhile, are arguing that those conversations need to happen right now. And that is because Americans this very month will start to receive notice of how much their health care premiums are going to increase if those Obamacare subsidies are not extended. So they want to make sure that Americans are able to factor in what their health care will look like. Democrats want to see those extended permanently. Republicans, some have said that they want to see an extension. Some want some reforms to the program. But that's really at the heart of the debate right now, as both sides remain locked in with no negotiations in sight for how to end this shutdown.
All right, Arlette Saenz, thank you so much. I want to bring in our CNN chief data analyst, Harry Enten, to look at the polling and this blame game. I mean, you're hearing these messaging wars, right, Harry? Walk us through what the numbers are saying about who Americans are blaming right now.
Yeah, I just saw the speaker up there trying to place the blame on Democrats, but I got to be honest with you, you look at the polling data and they simply put not buying Speaker Johnson's arguments. What are we talking about? Well, why don't we just blame more for the 2025 shutdown? Normally when you see Republican on the screen, that's a good thing because they're leading. But in this case, it's a bad thing because more Americans are blaming him for the shutdown. And you can see it's a sweep across the board. You look at the New York Times poll, blame Republicans more by 7 points. How about the CBS poll, came out yesterday? Blame Republicans more by 9 points. How about the Marist University poll? Blame Republicans more by 12 points. And then the Washington Post poll takes the cake, blaming Republicans more by 17 points. You average it all together, and we're talking about a double-digit margin in which more Americans are blaming the Republicans than the Democrats. Now, perhaps that shouldn't be so surprising to students of history. Why? Because we've had a number of shutdowns in the past. And which party almost always, or basically always, seems to get blamed? It's the Republican Party that always seems to get blamed, whether it's the 95-96 shutdowns, 2013, or the 2018-2019 shutdowns. And more importantly, what I think is so important is we are still at the beginning of this shutdown, right? What happens right now in the polling may not necessarily hold going forward. But historically speaking, what we've actually seen is that the party that gets blamed at the start of the shutdowns, 95, 96, 2013, 2018, 2019, is the same party that gets blamed by the end of the shutdown. So at this point, more Americans are blaming the Republicans than the Democrats. And historically speaking, that margin, those margins have tended to hold.
That's interesting. So how many Americans dislike both sides here? You show the Republican side that right now Americans are blaming Republicans, but overall, what about both sides?
Yeah, okay. So, we're talking, we saw the margins, right here where more folks are blaming Republicans than Democrats. But of course, what about people who don't like either side, right? What about this? So blame more for the shutdown. Look, you got Republicans at 39%, Democrats at 27%. But both sides equally, we're talking about a third of the American people, basically 30% on the average poll, who are blaming both sides equally. So this is not a case in which the American public is loving the arguments that Democrats are putting forward. It's more that they hate the Republicans more. And if given the choice, what we're really talking about is a majority of the, or a large portion of the American public who don't like really either side in this situation. So the American people, I think, kind of just feel like losers in this situation.
Is there any indication why Americans are more likely to blame Republicans for a shutdown, even if historically, as you showed in those numbers, it hasn't always been the Republicans in charge, but yet they still get the blame? Any indication why?
Yeah, look, I think what's so important to recognize here is that, look, historically speaking, Republicans get the blame, but also what are we talking about? I think at this particular point, we're seeing who is instigating the shutdown and whether or not this thing is really going to last for a long period of time. And what I'll just say in this situation, what Americans want pre-shutdown, what we're talking about is 49% now in 2025 say they want their side to stand on principle. So we really have both sides locked in versus historically people want compromise, but now we're really split. So I expect this thing to just go on and on and on.
And as a result, you have federal workers who won't potentially get, their paychecks, and this could really impact Americans. All right, Harry Enten, thank you so much.
Thank you.